get started with a charging station, we first need to create a mold that would kind of house and frame out the epoxy resin. To do so, I grabbed some of the scrap shelving material. Essentially, you just need any kind of melamine surface that would prevent things from being stuck to it. And when I made the cuts, I essentially created the overall mold to be 6 by 7 inches. Now the depth had to at least hold 1 inch, but at some points we can actually pour a little bit more just so later on we can sand some of it off. When assembling our molds, I'm just using basic 1 1/4 inch screws to do a butt joint and tighten it all together. But the big idea here is to waterproof the area to prevent it from leaking out through all these joints. So to do so, we need to use some tape. The tape that we need is specifically a waterproofing tape. Typically people use a sheathing kind of tape that you can find in your local hardware store. I got this stuff from T-Rex. It's a waterproof tape. It was my first time trying it, so I was very curious. It's extremely sticky and it's very flexible, so I was just gonna give that a go. Now the actual epoxy resin, there's a lot of different products out there and you can go whatever you want. But the guys at my local Woodcraft kind of turned me on to this new product called System 3. It's my very first time using it, specifically because they said this is a product that's far more easier to work with and a lot more clear and transparent. So I decided to give it a go. It worked great, actually. It worked just like any other system. It's a 2-to-1, 1 part hardener, 2 parts resin, mix it thoroughly and pour. The depth was about 1 inch in depth. You can always go a little bit more, a little bit less, but I think overall that gave me plenty of room to work with. Now, one dilemma when working with epoxy, specifically in colder times of the season, is when you pour it, you'll see these air bubbles that are there. Now that stuff stays there. When it hardens, you will see all those bubbles. There's a trick to getting rid of them. What I'm using is a TS4000 torch with a MAP Pro gas from Bernzomatic. And I'm lightly going over the entire surface area, bringing the air bubbles to the surface, and then they evaporate. All you need is a quick couple passes, and then you'll have a crystal clear glass smooth surface. The epoxy started hardening rather quickly, and by the next morning, it was rock hard. Now, my biggest fear was that it would chip away and break when the molds would be taken apart, so I gave it a full 3 days of drying. It might be overkill, but I wanted to be on the safe side, specifically how expensive this stuff really is. Once I got the epoxy safely out of the mold, I basically started treating it like I would with rough sawn lumber and decided to start milling it. Now this is where it came to an advantage of having a 6 by 7 because that piece actually fits my jointer. After a few passes, nice slow passes, I created one true flat side. Now typically what you would do is after the first side, you would bring it to a thickness planer to create a parallel matching surface, but I was afraid that being such a small piece, my thickness planer would just shoot this thing out. So I decided to take my chance and just flip it over and then just kind of eyeball it to make it as flat parallel to the other surface as possible. After being done with the joiner, we brought it to the table saw and started squaring off the edges. Not much, usually about 1/4 to even less than that was taken off on each side to create these nice, beautiful, almost ice cube looking dimensions. Once we get all of our pieces flat, we're gonna bring our smart technology. We're gonna lay our phone on our watch and make a marking where the watch will begin with the arm and then where it will meet the phone. Once we make little markings, use the little square to trace out exactly where the cut will take place. Now before we cut, we're gonna bring it to the table saw. We're gonna tilt the blade about 15 degrees and we're gonna create one swift cut on the bottom. This is the part that's gonna sit towards the base and get glued. After creating a nice safe miter cut, we can bring it over to our bandsaw and cut out the arm that we laid out earlier with the smart technology. If you don't have a bandsaw, you can always use a jigsaw and just take your time with it. Sanding is going to be broken down into 2 parts. 80 grit, 120, and 220 is going to be done right now where our project is disassembled. Then the 300, 400, 5, and 600 is going to be done once our project is assembled. I routed a channel at the bottom of the base plate to anticipate ever getting either a larger phone or a larger case. To do so, you can take a bullnose router with your palm router, secure a straight edge, and take small incremental passes to get to about 1/4 inch depth. Now to conceal some of these cables, we'll need to drill a few holes. The first one will be 1 1/8 inch in diameter Forstner bit that will secure the charging station. Then we'll take a 1/2 inch Forstner bit and drill a hole all the way through. This is where the cable will go towards the back. Now we need to create a channel that will go from one hole to the other. To do so, let's lay down some tape to prevent scratching and then use any kind of small bladed saw, like in my situation, this Dremel saw, and create a channel that will run about 1/8 inch in width from one hole to the other. Remove the tape and then do the same thing but on the bottom of the docking station. This is going to be the part where the charger from their phone It's gonna have the cable run all the way down through a hole and then run down a channel to be concealed as well. Attaching the top and bottom parts of this docking station is probably the hardest part, mostly because of the awkward clamping pressure that's happening with this miter. So the way I kind of tackled on that is using a glue, which is the A6000 industrial adhesive, and then this cool little jig from Certiflat Weld Table and Clamps Plus, where this little toggle clamp holds it in place, and then I could set the angle exactly where it needs to be to match the base. After the glue dries for 24 hours, I finished off the second part of the sanding process. And so with this, we're using 300, 400, 5, and then 600 grit. Now the 4, 5, and 600, I'm using these sanding sponges from Woodcraft as well, and they're really handy to do. Now at this point, you'll still see some fine scratches, but all of that's gonna be concealed once you put the finish on. I'm using a shellac mostly because how easy it is to apply. If I was to redo this project again, I'd probably use a wipe-on as opposed to spray just to prevent orange peel. But if you do have orange peel, you can totally fix that. Just use for the 500 grit sandpaper and 6 to clean up all that stuff and then put another finishing coat on top. Now finally, when we're securing these cables, I'm using a 1/2-inch drill bit to drill a hole all the way through the base and feed the cable through that hole and line it down that channel that we've created. I'm gonna do the same thing for the watch wireless charger. Once it sits in the hub, I'm gonna feed the cable through the channel, and then I'm gonna use hot glue to line the channel in the back of the hub to secure everything in place. Likewise, I'm gonna add some hot glue to the bottom of the cell phone charger port as well. Guys, thanks so much for watching this video. It does mean the world to me. A big thank you to Burns-O-Matic for sponsoring this project and partnering with us on this build. You guys probably already noticed that I'm wearing the brand new Mr. Build It Courage and Sweat t-shirt. I'll put a link in the description below. You guys can check out these shirts along with the new Mr. Build It Courage and Sweat stickers that are out there. If you're brand new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. We put a video out every single week. Like, share, and comment this video with your friends. Tune in out this week. We'll see you guys next week. See ya.